Abdu'l-Bahá was out with his secretary. A poor old man passed the inn with the master, asked the secretary to call him back. The man was not only rigged but filthy, but the master took his hand and smiled at him. They talked together for a while, the master taking in the whole figure. The man's trousers hardly served their purpose. The master laughed gently and stepped into a shadow. The street was quite deserted. He fumbled with the clothes at his waist. When he stopped, his trousers slid down, but he drew his rope around his body and handed his trousers to the poor old man with a "May God go with you."
Abdu'l-Bahá was going to entertain the governor of Akka. Before the day arrived, his wife went to the tailor and ordered a fine coat for him. When the day came, his wife laid out the new coat for Abdu'l-Bahá, but instead he asked for his old coat. He could not accept the new coat that his wife had ordered him. He said there was no reason to spend so much money on a coat just for him. He said with the money he could buy 5 simple ones, the one he normally wore. Then he would have a new coat and still have 4 coats to give to others.
I will read to you the story of young Abdu'l-Bahá and the sheep. One day, Baha'u'llah sent Abdu'l-Bahá to inspect the work of the shepherds who were taking care of his sheep. Abdu'l-Bahá was a small child at the time, and the persecutions against Baha'u'llah and his family had not yet started. Baha'u'llah then had a good deal of land in the mountains and owned large herds of sheep. When the inspection was finished, Abdu'l-Bahá was ready to leave. The man who had accompanied him said, "It is your father's custom to leave a gift for each shepherd." Abdu'l-Bahá became silent for a while because he did not have anything to give them. The man, however, insisted the shepherds were expecting something. Then Abdu'l-Bahá had an idea that made him very happy. He would give the shepherds the sheep they were taking care of. Baha'u'llah was very much pleased when he heard about Abdu'l-Bahā's generous thoughts towards the shepherds. He humorously remarked that everyone had better take good care of Abdu'l-Bahá because someday he would give himself away. Of course, that is exactly what Abdu'l-Bahá did for the rest of his life. He gave everything he had, each and every moment of his life, to humanity, to unite us and bring us true happiness. Enjoy your coloring!
Abdu'l-Bahá teaches how to pray. During his travels in America, Abdu'l-Bahá once accepted to teach a very devoted Baha'i how to pray. He told him to come to his residence at daybreak the next day. The believer's heart was filled with joy. He rose at dawn and rushed to the residence of Abdu'l-Bahá. When he entered the room of the master, he found him already in prayer. Realizing that he could not ask the master any questions, he decided to do the same. So he knelt on the floor and began to pray. He prayed silently for his relatives, for his friends, and for himself. When he finished, he looked up and saw that Abdu'l-Bahá was still deep in prayer. So he decided to pray some more. He repeated all the prayers he knew over and over. Still, there was no movement from Abdu'l-Bahá. Now the believer noticed that one of his knees was beginning to ache and that his back was feeling uncomfortable. Next, he heard the birds singing outside. Glancing around the room, he observed a large crack in the wall. Then he looked at the master again, and all of a sudden, the expression on Abdu'l-Bahā's face created in him a strong desire to pray. He forgot everything else. The only desire in his heart was to be close to God and to converse with him. he began to pray in a way that he had never prayed before. The master had taught him how to pray. And at that very moment, Abdu'l-Bahá arose, approached him with a smile, and said, "When you pray, you must not think of your aching body, nor of the birds outside the window, nor of the cracks in the wall. When you wish to pray, you must first know that you are standing in the presence of the Almighty."
When Abdu'l-Bahá was first in Chicago, it was spring and he was eager to go to the zoo. He had never seen a large city zoo and he was very merry over the prospect. Then it was explained to him that being the spring of the year, most of the animal mothers would be bearing litters. At the first approach of strangers, they'd rush their babies into safe hiding. This did not perturb Abdu'l-Bahá at all. He wanted to go anyhow, so a group of 5 or 6 of his friends took him. He motioned them to stay a little behind, and as he went forward all alone. And as he approached each cage, all the small animal mothers brought out their babies to show him, then hurried them back to safety and protection from the following friends.
Abdu'l-Bahá and 24 years of patience. While Abdu'l-Bahá was a prisoner in Akka, there was a man in that city who hated Abdu'l-Bahá very much. He behaved very badly towards Abdu'l-Bahá. He was not kind to Abdu'l-Bahá and said bad things about him. When he passed by Abdu'l-Bahá, he would be so rude and unkind that he would cover his own face so that he would not see Abdu'l-Bahā's face. He was a poor man. In spite of what he had done to Abdu'l-Bahá, Abdu'l-Bahá would still send him food and clothes. Once he fell sick, Abdu'l-Bahá sent a doctor to help him and even paid for his medicine and gave him some money. Yet he was very ungrateful. He took the gifts and did not even thank Abdu'l-Bahá. So ungrateful was he that he would give one hand to the doctor to check his pulse and use his other hand to cover his face so that he would not see Abdu'l-Bahā's face. This went on for many years. Abdu'l-Bahá continued to be kind. The one day he went to Abdu'l-Bahá, fell at Abdu'l-Bahā's feet and cried, "Forgive me, sir. For 24 years I have done evil to you. For 24 years you have shown only goodness to me. Now I know that I have been wrong. Please forgive me."
One of the interesting incidents I remember well is about the parrot, which was presented to the master. He had put it into the pilgrim house. My uncle, who was a steward of the pilgrim house, taught the parrot to say "aloha" to whoever approached it. Also, he had trained it to say, "O Bahá." The people who heard the parrot's voice and didn't see it thought that a person was there. One day, Abdu'l-Bahá called my uncle and told him, "Muhammad Hassan, bring the parrot to me tomorrow. I intend to present it to the governor of Akka." Muhammad Hassan took the cage containing the parrot to the holy house and put it beside the window of the hall. His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá used to get up early in the morning, walk for a while, and would chant prayers while walking. When that day he got up and approached the cage of the parrot, it said, Say. The master was very happy and smiling, advanced toward the parrot and asked, "What should I say?" "O Bahá." Abdu'l-Bahá exulted too much and later told my uncle, "Hassan, this parrot saved itself, since it said to me, say. And when I asked it what to say, it fluently said, O Bahá. Take it back to the pilgrim house. I do not desire to send it out of this place." When the parrot was dead, my uncle took its feathers and wrote down, "These are the feathers of a parrot which belong to His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá, and he has admired several times its fluency." This was the effect of training, which had some positive outcomes even for a parrot.
Abdu'l-Bahá and the Coach. One day, Abdu'l-Bahá wanted to go from Akka to Haifa. He went to take an inexpensive seat in a regular coach. The driver was surprised and must have asked himself why Abdu'l-Bahá was so frugal as to ride in this cheap coach. "Surely your excellency would prefer to travel in a private carriage," he exclaimed. "No," replied the master, and he traveled in a crowded coach all the way to Haifa. As he stepped down from the coach in Haifa, a distressed fisherwoman came to him and asked him for his help. All day she had caught nothing and now had to return to her hungry family. Abdu'l-Bahá gave her a good sum of money, turned to the driver, and said, "Why should I ride in luxury while so many are starving?"
Abdu'l-Bahá and Lua Getsinger. Lua Getsinger was one of the early Baha'is in the West who visited Abdu'l-Bahá in the prison city of Akka. One day, during their visit, the master took her aside and explained to her that he had many pressing matters to attend to and would not be able to call upon a friend who was very sick. He wished Lua to go in his place. He told her to take some food to the sick man and care for him as he had been doing. He also asked Lua to come sweep his home, clean his windows, and make his bed. Lua learned the address of the man and immediately set off to do as Abdu'l-Bahá had asked. She felt proud that Abdu'l-Bahá had entrusted her with a task that he usually would have carried out himself. But only a short while later, she returned to Abdu'l-Bahá in a state of distress. "Master," she explained, "surely you cannot realize what a terrible place you sent me. I almost fainted from the awful stench, the filthy rooms, the degrading condition of that man and his house. I fled lest I contract some terrible disease." Abdu'l-Bahá gazed at her sadly and sternly. If she wanted to serve God, he explained, she must serve her fellow man, because in every person she should see the image and likeness of God. Then he told her to go back to the sick man's house. If the house was dirty, she should clean it. If he was hungry, she should feed him. He asked her not to come back until all of this was done. Abdu'l-Bahá had done these things for his friend many times, and she should be able to do them once, he told her with firmness. That is how Lua learned an important lesson about what it means to serve her fellow human beings. Happy coloring!
Abdu'l-Bahá and the Uncomfortable Intruder. Two ladies from Scotland, delighted that their request to have an evening with the master while he was in London had been granted, were warmly received by Abdu'l-Bahá. How they relished having this intimate evening. Half an hour passed in his warm presence, when suddenly they were filled with consternation. An aggressive reporter strode in their midst and seated himself. He wanted information about the master. His talkative, impolite manner left the lady speechless. Such an intrusion could spoil that precious evening. Then, to their surprise, Abdu'l-Bahá stood up and beckoned the reporter to follow him, led the way into his room. The ladies had indeed got rid of their intruder, but they had also lost Abdu'l-Bahá. What were they to do? Before long, the hostess went into the master's secretary and asked that he be informed that the ladies with whom the appointment had been made are awaiting his pleasure. Very soon, kind words of farewell were heard. Then the master returned, pausing by the door. Gravely, he looked at each and said, "You are making that poor man uncomfortable. So strongly desiring his absence, I took him away to make him feel happy."